Hello, everyone. Good morning, and welcome to our workshop entitled If the Diagnosis is Dementia. We are so happy that you've decided to join us today, and we're excited to provide you with exclusive information and resources that will give you a deeper understanding of us and our services. My name is Emily, and I'm the Marketing Director for Clinkscale's Elder Law Practice. We are actually celebrating our 40 years of Clinkscales this year, with our main office located here in Hayes and our other office in Wichita, and we serve clients and families throughout the entire state of Kansas. I would like to invite you all to type any question that you may have in the chat box that's located at the bottom of your screen throughout the entire presentation. And then at the end of the workshop, we will address any of those questions or concerns that you do have. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to our attorney and president, Randy Clinkscales, to get us started.
Thank you, Emily. Before we get any further down the road, just want to check real quick. Can everybody see the slide okay? If you can, would you type in the chat box, type Y for yes or N for no? We'll pause just a second, see if we're getting responses.
I already see Y's coming in, Randy, so we're good.
Okay. So let me just share with you that yesterday I was on a hold with an airline for 2.5 hours. And so I was back in my office trying to run down some luggage that was missing. But it gave me time to sit down and really redo this workshop. Why? Because there's so many things that are changing right now. I think that one of the big fears that a lot of us have is that someday we're going to hear the words "you have dementia," or a loved one has dementia, and so I think that's why this is terribly important for me. We have a lot of clients that have dementia, but again, a lot of things are happening here. I don't know how many of you received this email that Emily sent out a day or two ago, but I want to just to tell you a little bit about what has happened. I attended the Alzheimer's state meeting in Wichita a while back, and one of the things that came out was that 40% of dementia cases could be prevented or delayed by targeting or modifying risks, certain risk factors. And some of those included diet, avoiding ultra-processed food, physical activity, not avoiding it, but engaging in physical activity, being sure you get enough sleep. One of the things that I was sharing with Emily a few minutes ago was that along this 40% article, they were talking about how important just having hearing aids can be in delaying or preventing dementia. Because many times if you can't hear, it causes isolation. It kind of goes on and on and on. So what are we looking at when with dementia? And again, these are just some numbers I updated. According to the Alzheimer's Task Force, 54,000 Kansans, this is in 2019, had dementia. That's 65 and above. There's a younger group that's not included in there. That number is expected to grow to 62,000. It's the sixth leading cause of death. This is one that I always astounding to me is the number of caregivers, 151,000 caregivers that are providing support. The other thing, if you jump down to the second bullet, is that 2/3 of Americans with Alzheimer's are women. I just didn't realize that disparity. 1 in 9 people 65 and above have Alzheimer's. But as we grow older, the number goes up. People 85 and above, 32% will have Alzheimer's dementia. So again, this is why it's an important topic. You know, we buy insurance for a fire to our home, and the odds are great that will never happen. But I want you to look at what the odds are of developing Alzheimer's, and so that's why it's so important that we plan for it. You're going to discover ways today to stay at home, to care for and communicate when dealing with dementia, how to protect yourself and your goals with important legal documents, and how to pay for care. So this is for you if you're concerned about developing dementia, or if you or a loved one has a diagnosis of dementia, and you're wanting to learn ways to communicate effectively. And that's really important because that's the make or break on keeping somebody at home. And again, wanting to keep a loved one at home with dementia. It's for you if you're a caregiver getting overwhelmed. You know, I share with a lot of people that the caregiver is the gatekeeper. They're the ones that are allowing a person with dementia to stay at home. It's for you if you don't have a legal plan in place that addresses the impact of dementia, or if you're wondering how to pay for long-term care if that becomes necessary, or if you're concerned about losing everything to long-term care cost. You know, when I meet with a client, one thing I like to ask them after we kind of do we talk about their health, we talk about what kind of resources they have, what kind of plan they have. And I ask them, what are your goals? If you could wave a magic wand, what would you have happen? One gentleman yesterday I talked to, his number one goal, if he could wave a magic wand, was to be younger. And there's a lot I can do, but that's one I can't help with. But be able to care for a loved one at home and find assistance with care. Have a legal plan in place that specifically addresses the unique issues of dementia. Be able to pay for care without losing everything. Protect your property and income for your spouse, your children, or others. And I think really it boils down to having peace of mind that everything is going to be okay, that you have a plan and that you're not alone. And I think of all the diseases, Alzheimer's has to be number one in creating that feeling that you're all alone when you're a caregiver. One of my early cases was Tad. And let me just read what he shared. When my wife was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, I tried to care for her myself. My son, a doctor, told me I had to get help or we would end up with two sick people. My banker recommended Clink Scales. Clink Scales helped me care for myself and my wife, and they helped me monitor my care and my wife's care. If I ever had a question, I just had to pick up the phone. And then his closing comment was, I never could have done this without you. So who am I? I'm an attorney with offices in Wichita and Hayes, but we have clients throughout. I'm an elder care attorney, and that's really been my focus for the last 8 years, working with people with aging and chronic care issues and helping them to protect assets from long-term care costs. Just to show you know a little bit more background, I'm a founding member of the National Alliance of Attorneys for Alzheimer's Planning. And I got to serve on Governor Kelly's Alzheimer's disease task force in 2019 and 2020, both because I was an elder law attorney, but also because of the number of cases that we have with Alzheimer's and my location in Western Kansas, which creates a challenge for a lot of our clients that have Alzheimer's or other dementias. I share this photograph of my family. This is my 3 sons, my 2 grandsons, my wife, and my daughter-in-law. But I really, I've used the picture for about a year now, but as I was working on the slideshow last night, I had to wonder what effect Alzheimer's one day may have on our family. As I do this, I realize the odds are real that somehow we're going to be impacted, whether that's one of us, whether it's a family member. It just the possibilities are great that we're going to be dealing with some type of Alzheimer's in the future. Why am I so passionate? So I'm a passionate elder care attorney. And the reason I am is because I had the extreme privilege of getting to work with my grandmother for 10 years. And prior to that, I was not an elder law attorney. I worked with her for about 4 years when I realized how much of a need there was for people that would focus and specialize in elder care. I learned a lot from my grandmother in caring for her. And to boil it down, she wanted to be independent. She wanted to stay out of a nursing home. Her modest resources, she just wanted to use them to maintain the lifestyle that she wanted. But I also learned, very importantly, that I could not go it alone. When it comes to my grandmother, even though I'm a lawyer and supposedly I have all the answers, which I learned I didn't, I needed what we call a care coordinator in our office to guide me through so many things that are not necessarily legal, but have to do with health care and getting good care. Since I made that transition, we have been amazed at how many clients come to us that are facing dementia. It is the most costly disease. It has the highest caregiver burnout, and it may be the most complex in terms of caregiving. So while again, my journey with my grandmother was great, but I learned that I had to have a plan, and I had to be flexible with that plan based on how my grandmother was doing. Wanted to share this as a comment from a client. We met with this family. Let me just kind of read to you. My dad would have lost everything financially had it not been for Randy and his team using their expertise to divert what Randy termed the approaching train wreck. What Randy did for our family was create a life care plan for my mom with the goal of keeping her safe and protecting as many of their assets as he could. And again, is trying to keep her at home. We used her social services expertise, legal services, and all the other services that came with the plan. It was an investment my dad and my sisters and I shared. Kind of jump down. If you're an individual wondering how you will one day respectfully care for your aging parents, consider checking into this law firm. And I think that that's a real important goal for us, is showing respect for the person with dementia, or even in cases like yesterday, where it's the kids are trying to take care of their parents. One has dementia, but they want the other one to be involved and be treated respectfully. They want to treat her respectfully. A diagnosis of dementia does not have to devastate your family or your finances. So I think that's the takeaway I want you to have. You're going to discover today how to care for and communicate with somebody with dementia, and how to care for yourself as a caregiver. Then we're going to talk about the legal planning you need to do because of dementia. And then finally, how to pay for care without going broke. So how do you care for someone and communicate with them that has dementia? So we're going to go through some tools here, but I want to emphasize that many times when I'm in a meeting with a family that's facing dementia, they many times want to focus on the person with dementia, which is important. But a lot of our focus is how do we help the caregiver? How do we help the caregiver to be a good caregiver without their health failing? So let's give an example. And so this is not terribly unusual. So I had a meeting with the Smith family. And so Mr. and Mrs. Smith came in. Mr. Smith is diagnosed with dementia and is in the home. He's probably about midway through the dementia journey. Their daughter, Alice, came in. Right away, I mean, they're at the point where he cannot be left alone. He has something called sundowners, which means as the sun goes down, he gets agitated. He wants to walk around. And so Mrs. Smith is not sleeping well. She has quit her job at her sorority. Alice has seen her mom deteriorate faster than her dad. But what I want to point out to you is that in the meeting, there was a lot of bickering between Alice, her mom, and Mr. Smith. And things were being said like, quote, "Remember, Dad, we've gone over this," close quote. Or "Dad, your brother died already." Just different things like that that were not serving our meeting very well. I actually took a break in the meeting and had somebody show, my recollection is I had somebody show Mr. Smith to the restroom while I talked with Mrs. Smith and Alice and kind of got them under control and encouraged them not to be argumentative. But let me just tell you, after that they decided to use our firm, we worked with Mrs. Smith with one of our trained care coordinators that has specialized in dementia. We got her back to work and back in her sorority. We got respite care for Mr. Smith. We worked with Senior Companion for some breaks for Mrs. Smith. And we talked about a lot caregiver tips. And so one of the things from Alice was, you helped save Mom and allowed us to keep Dad at home much longer. Plus we saved thousands of dollars. And part of it was that, what we call the promise that Mrs. Smith said, and in our meeting said, "I want to take care of my husband. That was my promise." So let's talk a little bit about the caregiver tips. This is the care for the caregiver. You need to take care of yourself first. You cannot pour from an empty cup. Give your relationship love and attention. Be careful of changing roles from a spouse, child, friend to a caregiver. Watch for signs of stress. Combat stress. And finally, the one that I think is important, they're all important, but allow others to help you. I urge my clients that if somebody in church, as an example, says, "Can I do anything for you?" Take their name and their telephone number. You may think of something later on, but it's nice to have a pool of potential helpers out there. Real important in this case, though, was helping Mrs. Smith communicate better with Mr. Smith, as well as Alice communicating better with her dad. Don't argue, try to agree. Rather than reason, try to divert or change the subject. Jill Wexler in our office, I thought it was very interesting. We had a meeting a while back, and the person with dementia was in the room. I thought it was very interesting what a great job she did of diverting the person with dementia so that the conversation could continue on. Try not to lecture, instead reassure. Avoid the R word, remember, instead reminisce. Don't say I told you, instead repeat or regroup. Try not to say you can't, instead give some direction about what they can do. Try not to command or demand, instead ask or model behavior. And don't condescend, instead encourage or praise. Don't enforce, instead reinforce. And then kind of one of my rules that is important when I'm meeting with the family and the person with dementia is in the room is respect the person with dementia. I'm going to assume they understand everything that's being said in that room. And I don't want their feelings to be hurt. Even though they may not remember it later, I want us to show them respect. Let me share another client story with you. It starts off with Clink Scales has successfully delivered on their promise to organize my trust agreement and organize all of our medical documents and then put them all in one binder that includes funeral arrangements. What a wonderful stress relief for me and my family. Kayla, the care coordinator, has been immensely supportive while navigating the mysteries of obtaining quality home health for my wife. This support is priceless to me. Qualifying for all the home care has enabled us to stay in our home while still providing care services to my wife. So I highlighted organize in arrangements. So many times when we're dealing with a family facing dementia, organization goes out the window. And so many times our first order of business is trying to get things organized. What do they have? What do they not have? What do we need to get? What can we get rid of? What's not helping? What is helping? And so that is really key. The second thing is that Kayla's help in this situation. Many times people are going to be facing dementia one time, hopefully, that's all, where we deal with it on a daily basis and know how to navigate the system. And so in this case, it helped them stay at home. So what do you need to do if you're trying to care for and communicate with somebody with dementia? Schedule a strategy session with our office that explores what tools are available and what resources may be available. Start implementing a strategy right away to better communicate and take care of the caregiver. And again, I want to go back to Emily's email about incorporating some change of lifestyle in the person with dementia so that we can slow down the process and give you more time. Number two, what's the legal planning you need to do because of dementia? This surprises a lot of people. Again, in a meeting yesterday, the family was so surprised that they just thought the spouse had the right to make decisions for the person, for the ill spouse, and that's not Kansas law. Either you have a power of attorney or you have to go to court to get a document that gives you power. So my comment to my clients is they may be struggling about, well, I don't know who to act for me, and so forth. And I always say, well, you can decide or someone else will, like a court. And so you say who has the power to act on your behalf. No one has automatic power. You express your wishes. Your essential documents decide what can be done for you. Your legal planning documents include financial and healthcare powers of attorneys and either a will or trust, perhaps a living will, and HIPAA releases. And your investment in planning can save the family thousands of dollars. So let me just share with you that I continue to modify my financial and healthcare power of attorney, and sometimes my trust, because things change and because my wishes become more clear as I grow older. So as an example, I have some real specific language about what type of care I want and don't want if I develop dementia. So one of the things that we run into is, I think here's a good example. This is a case where Mrs. Jackson has two daughters. One lived out of state and one lived in Kansas. The one that lived in Kansas is disabled. Mrs. Jackson had dementia for many years, but was staying at home. And I think it was kind of the burying their head in the sand. The daughter, Betty, is the power of attorney agent. And what brought this to head, Mrs. Jackson ended up in the hospital for some reason. And then the hospital would not release her unless she went to a nursing home, because they did not feel that she would be safe at home. The daughter had a very limited power of attorney. I think it was one that she pulled off the internet. But it did not allow for some specific type of gifting. Now remember, one daughter is disabled and she's just on SSDI, so Social Security Disability. Mrs. Jackson has a home, and as you may or may not be aware, if Mrs. Jackson needs to go on Medicaid, if she transfers away property, she will be penalized. However, there is an exception if she transfers property to a disabled child. But you have to have that power inside the power of attorney. Otherwise, you can't do it. And a court's not going to give Betty the power to transfer her mom's home to her disabled sister. So this is a case where the family waited too long to take action. If they had seen an elder care attorney that specialized in dementia, he would have seen the problem with the power of attorney, and we would have been able to protect the home. So this is a family that did just the opposite. They actually were very aggressive early on. So it started out as kind of a sad case, but it turned into a wonderful plan. So Mr. Lundgren actually called us from a neurologist's office, and the neurologist had given Mr. and Mrs. Lundgren our name because of our focus on dementia. He had been diagnosed with early signs of dementia. He's just in his early 60s. He's very concerned what's going to happen if years from now he needs care. He's an active farmer, and he still has capacity. When we got them into the office rather quickly, his comment to me was, "I want to stay in control, but I want to be sure my wife and my land are protected." So what we did in this case, because again, early on, Mr. Lundgren has capacity. but knows there's some dark spaces in his memory. So we set up very broad powers of attorney. We put the land into a special type of irrevocable trust, and we added his care instructions to his healthcare power of attorney. And then we met with his agent so that they know his wishes. So part of that, again, is like I was telling you, in my power of attorney, Mr. Lundgren wants to be sure that the family understands his wishes in the event that at some point he no longer has capacity. So when we met with Mr. and Mrs. Lundgren initially, they were very upset. There were a lot of tears in the meeting. When we visited for a while, and then it came back, and I showed them a plan that we could put together. They were so thrilled. And so when we had our second meeting, it was much different. They were much more relaxed because they knew they had a plan. And we achieved his goals. His land is protected in this special type of irrevocable trust. He remains in control, and he will continue to farm his ground. If at some point he does lose capacity or can no longer work, his wife has power to further protect resources. And again, his care goals are preserved, taking pressure and guilt off his family. So I know it's going to be a journey for the family, but I know that they're so much more comfortable that there's a plan in place, and they understand that plan. So if you don't have the legal planning necessary for a diagnosis of dementia, you need to, if facing dementia or concerned about developing dementia, meet with us for a strategy session. Don't wait. The longer you wait, the greater the crisis, and the more limited the options. Act while capacity is not an issue. And again, I could spend a whole hour talking about capacity, but that's a legal question that we deal with all the time. Express your goals in your legal documents. Empower your agents and caregivers to carry out your goals. And don't give up. There are solutions. Now, how to pay for dementia care? Probably the number one phone call in our office is how to pay for care. You make the decision on how to pay for care. You don't have to go broke if you need dementia care. You can learn ways, we'll learn ways that you can use government benefits to pay for care, such as Medicare, VA, and Medicaid. So I actually put together last night this example. Mr. and Mrs. Joseph are in their 50s. Mrs. Joseph has been diagnosed with early onset dementia. What are their options? And so part of the reason I'm throwing this in there is because Mrs. Joseph is in her 50s. And what does that mean? Is that most people will tell you that they're stuck because she's not on Medicare, and so they're really in a jam. So what I want to make you aware of is that recently the Social Security disability rules changed, and so there's a compassionate care exception that would allow Mrs. Josephs to get on SSDI. It is much, much easier to prove than it used to be. Why is that important? Because she will start receiving an income based on her income history. And as important to me, we'll start the clock running on Medicare. So generally, once she is on disability, we have after 2 years, she will then qualify for Medicare, even though she's not 65. We want to explore if they have a long-term care policy and how can we tap into it. Is it something we can tap into that would provide for maybe some respite care in the home? Medicare will pay for some services, like cognitive assessment and care plan services. It'll pay for inpatient hospital care, some doctor's fees, and some medical items. It'll pay for hospice. It's not going to pay for custodial care, and that's where we really get involved. I want to know, was there an exposure to Agent Orange? Because again, the VA benefit could generate up to $2,200 a month. They've expanded the type of illnesses that the VA is covering because of Agent Orange, Camp Lejeune exposure, and different things like that. What community resources are available to Mr. and Mrs. Josephs? So we're going to guide them through the process and, of course, set up the legal plan. But the point I want to make here is that we can right away in the early stages get more involved. And again, I go back to Emily's email, talk to them about changing some lifestyle activities that they have. This is another case where the Schmidts are wanting to ensure that they are protected if one of them develops dementia or some other chronic illness. And actually, this was a appointment that was scheduled by their children. And just by way of background, they're 72. They were 72 and 70. They had just purchased some long-term care insurance, and it only paid about $3,200 a month. They were retired. They had some nice IRAs, $350,000 and $200,000. They also had some investments. Their goal was that they didn't want to be a burden on their children. They want to protect each other, but they don't want to be a burden on their children. And that is a common comment, not to be a burden. So there's something called the Pension Protection Act that allows for us to go work with the Schmidts and work with an insurance company to buy a hybrid life insurance policy. In this case, it was a $200,000 policy. They spent $150,000 on that policy, but it's a $250,000 death benefit. The key for them was there is a long-term care rider of $7,000 a month, and there's no more premiums, and they know the policy will never go up. I'm not urging that that's always the solution. My point is that we have those types of solutions available that we can direct our clients on. And again, I think it's just knowing what tools and what resources are out there. And finally, I want to talk with you about crisis planning using Medicaid. And so sometimes clients hear, well, it's too late, or we don't have enough to make a difference. So there is a type of dementia called Lewy bodies dementia. I've had several clients and a friend that have had Lewy bodies dementia. In this case, Mrs. Goforth has Lewy bodies. And again, Lewy bodies is a combination of dementia and Parkinson's. That's a gross oversimplification. But she's been discharged to a nursing home from the hospital, paying $8,000 a month. Their asset include Mr. Goforth's retirement of $300,000. They have a joint account of $60,000. He has Social Security of income of $1,500, and she has Social Security of $800. They were told by the nursing home They would need to spend down all their resources before Medicaid would help. Mr. Goforth would have to use his income to pay for her care, and Medicaid would put a lien on the home. Mr. Goforth was worried that his wife would not get good care if she went on Medicaid. So, there's a lot of misinformation out there about how Medicaid works. There are some laws out there about not impoverishing the well spouse. So using those Medicaid tools and legal documents, we restructured their assets. We were able to qualify Mrs. Goforth for Medicaid. As a result, Mr. Goforth was not forced to go broke. He has enough income to take care of himself, even though she is on Medicaid. He kept his IRA. There's no lien on the home, and he can sell it without losing it to Medicaid. And we began monitoring his wife's care and advocating for her, giving peace of mind to Mr. Goforth. I want to add this to you, this information to you. If Mr. and Mrs. Goforth were wartime veterans, a VA pension might have been available up to $2,200 a month tax-free. So that's always, again, yesterday's meeting, I discovered that the client was eligible for VA pension. He served during the Korean War, but he stayed in the United States, so he thought he was not eligible. But it's a real key to making his plan work, because we can use that $2,200 to help pay for caregivers that come into the home for him. So what do you need to do if trying to pay for dementia care? Schedule a strategy session as soon as possible. Explore with us all funding resources. Get in place strong powers of attorney and other estate planning documents. And again, our goal is to find, get, and pay for good care without going broke. I want to share the journey of Pat with you. Pat came to us. She had moved her husband from out of state into Kansas to be near family. He had dementia. Her husband's dementia accelerated much faster, so that neither Pat nor her relatives could take care of him at home. But we kept him home for a while, but then had to help her transition. When Pat came in, she was very bitter that she was having to go on this journey. After working with Pat for several years, she really became quite the fan of our office and a good friend. And let me just read what she wrote. My husband needed nursing home care. You guided me through the process. Your care coordinators made sure my husband was getting good care. I highly recommend you because you're always there for your clients and will guide them through things that go on, things we never expected to go through. And I think that is key. Again, I talked about this earlier. This is a journey that we take all the time with families. And so we know that it's a curvy road with a lot of bends and stops along the way. But as I said, this is not our first rodeo. So that's why our services were so valuable to Pat. Just a comment from Lucille: as you move through these stages of life, you need clink skills. You know that what they have done for you is the right thing. So we're getting near the end. And so far you've discovered if dealing with dementia, it's important to care for the caregiver. And it's important to have and use good communication tools. And again, that goes a long way to keeping someone at home. It's important to know and access community resources. There are special, specific legal documents that you absolutely need to protect yourself, your family, and your wishes. There are ways to pay for possible care costs, and the plan will protect your spouse, your family, and your assets. You can pay for care with private resources, or if you can access government programs, or you can access government programs, but you don't have to go broke just because of dementia. With proper care and planning, you can delay or avoid the nursing home, allowing you to stay at home longer. So I hope you get this one thing. Proper planning with a dementia-focused expert allows you to focus experts, because I think that's key, because it's not just me, it's everyone else at our office. So proper planning with dementia-focused experts directs you on ways to stay at home, protect your family, and preserve your assets from the devastation of dementia. So how do you make that happen? Again, in our strategy session, we'll talk about care for the caregiver, legal planning necessary because of dementia, and methods to pay for care. So this is how it works. The first thing is that you have to hold up your hand, and we'll talk about how to do that. We'll have a short phone call with you first to be sure that we can help, and at least make that first phone call. If we can't help, or if you don't like the feel of the meeting, you can always walk away. I think so many times people think my problem's too little, or it's too late to get anything done. Please let us at least have that first phone call with you, and so that maybe we can give you some direction. And if we can't help you, we'll try to find someone who can. Let's assume that we get through that first phone call and we both feel like we want to do something. Then we'll schedule a 60 to 90-minute meeting in person, or by Zoom, or by telephone, with me or one of our other two partner attorneys. And we'll talk about what's going on, the stages of the dementia. I want to review your current estate plan. I want to talk to you about what your goals are. If you are dealing with dementia, we want to talk about a plan to keep you safe and in the least restrictive environment. I may want you to meet with one of our care coordinators that has a lot of tools. And then I'll share with you, or I'll address with you questions that you have about your unique situation. I've been doing this. Again, my focus has been for 18 years. Every case is unique. No two people are alike. Everybody has their own special journey. But at the end of our time together, you're going to have a better understanding of the dementia journey and what steps need to be implemented. You'll have an analysis of your situation and your current plan. I think most importantly, you'll have clarity of your issues and goals. And I think a lot of times when people come into my office, that's what they take away most, is they have more clarity about what is going on, what they need to do, and how to get there. And we'll establish a blueprint for that. And then I'll let you know what the investment will be to get that done. After our meeting, the most important thing that you're going to do is decide to get started. And then we'll draft a summary of the plan, prepare the legal documents. We'll meet at least one more time after that, get everything signed. And then you and my office will begin working on getting everything in place, such as titling and so forth. If dealing with a chronic illness or aging issues that require assistance, we may want to have one of our care coordinators involved in something called a life care plan. So how do you do this? What's the catch? We have 6 spots available in the next 4 weeks. If you want to, this offer is open. If you call this number, 877-325-8040, or Emily is going to send you a link that you can click on. And then we'll start with that first phone call. My personal guarantee, if you have a meeting with our office, is that you're going to know more than you do today. You'll have an analysis of what happens if you do nothing. But you'll realize that there are options available to guide and protect you and your family, and that's probably the most important point. So book your strategy session, call the number on the screen, 877-325-8040, or click on the SurveyMonkey link. If you do, we're going to send you a copy of a book that I wrote. It's a pamphlet, a guide to Alzheimer's care, and it will give you a written summary of our recommendations. So remember, call the number, and you'll get the free strategy session and all these things on the screen. So Emily, I am going to turn it over to you to see if there are any questions that anybody has.
It looks like we have one question, but I would encourage everyone to please put any questions you have in the chat box now as we move forward. But Randy, when is the best time to start planning?
Yesterday. I think I will share with you that even as my kids turned 18, I wanted them to do powers of attorneys and so forth to get that done. Planning changes as we grow older. The goals change. Obviously, the planning I do for my assistant who has 3 little kids at home is different than the planning that I do for my grandmother. We like to start talking about dementia planning as people get into their 50s. But I will tell you, I have a handful of clients with dementia that are less than 50 years of age. So again, having good and effective powers of attorneys, it really needs to be done right away because it does give us some flexibility to plan. But again, to answer your question, I certainly want people to start planning at least by the time they're in their 50s.
Perfect. Thank you so much for addressing that question. It doesn't look like we have any additional questions in the chat box at this moment, but please feel free to add your question now as we wrap up our presentation for this morning. I do want to kindly remind everyone that you will receive that email that Randy mentioned that contains the important things. It includes the recording of this session, and we send that to you so you can share it with other family members that weren't able to join you today, kids, spouses, or colleagues or friends that weren't able to make the session as well. Or just so that way you can go back through and take notes on all of the important topics and caregiver tips that Randy gave you today. The other thing the email contains is the SurveyMonkey link, and I did put it in the chat box here. So it's all ready for you to complete. And if you just fill it out, that quick 2-minute survey, you'll receive the completely free strategy session or consultation where you can speak with one of our attorneys about your completely unique situation. And I do want to just reiterate that you can call our office at any time at the 877 number on the screen. If you have any questions regarding the free strategy session or just questions in general, we're always happy to chat. So I'm going to do one last call here for questions before we close up, and I don't see any. So thank you all so much for joining us today. Please let us know if we can help you. And thank you so much for sharing the information, Randy.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. Thank you, everyone.